Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Los Angeles Rams Insider Podcast. I'm your host and beat writer, Brock Vieira. You can check out all of our work at www.si.com/NFL /Rams /on SI, where we drop double digit pieces of content every single day, keeping all the fans updated with everything that's happening with the Rams, the moves that they're making, how that's going to affect the salary cap moving forward, and just a variety of topics, of course, associated with the team, their ambitions in free agency, and their ultimate goals of this offseason. One of those goals, of course, was to fix the issues within their secondary. And they've done that in a variety of ways. Today, we're going to talk about the recent news that, of course, after trading for Trent McDuffie, the All Pro Super Bowl winning quarterback from Kansas City, who is a Los Angeles native, the Rams then doubled down in their secondary to go out and re sign Cam Curl to a 3-year deal worth $36 million that can balloon up to $39 million. So let's talk about what this move means, the finances. Let's just dive into it. So when you talk about a player like Cam Curl, a player that I've had the privilege of covering for the past year and who I've been writing about for the past 2 years, ever since he came to the Rams, of course, before the 2024 season. Curl was a player coming out. He wasn't really great. He wasn't graded as a top prospect. Obviously, late day 3 pick, has a phenomenal rookie year with the Washington Commanders. This is way back when. And then after that, we didn't see that level of play from him again. And we wondered what was the reason for it and if any of those were really his fault. At that time, it was the Ron Rivera era. It was the back end of it. There wasn't a lot of good things going on, and it coincided with the end of Dan Snyder's ownership of the franchise. Plus, Jack Del Rio was defensive coordinator. I don't really need to go much more into that. It was just a bad situation, and it showed because when Curl came to Los Angeles, he was one of the primary reasons the Browns were able to turn around their season in 2024 and then help set up the success of 2025. Of course, the Rams coming out of their bye week were sitting at 1-4, if I'm not mistaken, and they needed some type of something in order to start to work their way back in the divisional race. At that time, of course, the Seahawks were under first-year head coach Mike McDonald. He was doing some different things, but they were winning a lot of games, especially on the road. And it seemed that they were in position to take the division. San Francisco was paying the bill for the 2023 season, and then were struck by a bunch of injuries, so they were out of the competition. Arizona had a good start. You thought they might be the team, but then they faded off badly late, and that ended up setting up the end of the Jonathan Gannon era. And then for the Rams coming out of the bye week, they're playing the Raiders, a team they should be beating, but they were struggling here and there against them. At that time, of course, Cooper Cup and Puka Nacua were injured. Pardon me. So you didn't have that, those two, that tandem to go after, top defenses. And you wondered what would be the thing that would change the narrative for the Rams. It ended up being Cam Curl. His work against the Raiders completely changed that game. What he did on defense, the damage he was able to inflict, and then just how opportunistic he was. It changed the entire narrative of the season because that win right there set up a win on Thursday night against the then hot Minnesota Vikings, to where Puka Nacua and Cooper Cup came back. Nacua went off in that game, and they needed him. And then the week after that, they go out to Seattle, and then they defeat the Seahawks in overtime to then get 500 on the season. And then they started that late season campaign. They ended up winning the division. They made it to the divisional round, and then obviously that transition to this year. Curl had another great year, and then he hit free agency. I did not see this move coming, to be honest with you. I vouched for it. I then went into the reasons why I don't think it's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, for all those reasons that I thought it wouldn't happen, it did. I thought the money was going to be too high. I thought the years might be a bit too long. And the position. The Rams had to address the secondary. There's no doubt about it. But there was a way that they went about things in the past. There was a way that they go about things now. You expected your standard deviation as positional values change in accordance to how the game is played. That's why it makes sense to extend a player like Quentin Lake, who does so much from that slot corner slash star position. That's why it makes sense to extend a player like Nate Landman because he provided a lot of other things outside of his play, like strong leadership, communication, and then at that time, of course, he was a turnover-inducing machine. It made sense to extend a guy like Kyrie Williams because he helps so much with the offense beyond just being a running back. Pass blocker, receiver, he does it all. There's trust there with Matthew Stafford. So that's why you go out and you extend a running back in the modern market if you're the Rams, who I believe didn't extend a running back. The last time they did it was Todd Gurley, and we all know how that ended. And then you started to wonder, could this be something that does go down, especially as we hit this critical point before the start of open free agency? Carl, I had the baseline being 3 years, 7.5 million per year. I thought if Carl wanted more than that, I thought the Rams didn't walk because of the finances. I thought if he wanted more years than three, the Rams would let him walk because of the finances. Also, they have the 2023 draft class coming up, and they also have their free agent ambitions, along with, of course, having to free up the money to sign their draft class this year. I thought Carl would bite too much into that. The deal that he got today, depends on how they structured it, is set to be a $12 million cap hit. Depends what the guaranteed money's at. Depends, again, like I said, how they structured it. Fortunately for the Rams, they do have an owner who's cash rich, so they're able to put actual live liquid cash into play in order to structure deals in the way that they want to. But you can only structure things so much. And you got to think about this 2023 class that's coming up. Though they won't be on the books of the big deals this year, they will be next year. Let's talk about players like Steve Avila, Warren McClendon, Puka Nacua, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Ethan Evans, and others. How do you bring all those guys back? Especially if you're expected to give McDuffie a over $30 million deal in terms of average annual value, plus Carl's $12 million. I didn't think it was a possibility. So the fact that the Rams made this decision to do so tells me that's how much they value him. And there's a reason why they do that. It's because of the consistency he provides. One, he plays virtually every snap because he's able, for the most part, though he doesn't like to come up to the line of scrimmage, depending on how they play him, he is playing more of that center field role, especially when the Rams go into that single high safety look, which is something that I think that this move signals that they will be doing next season. Because if they do so, you can put Trent McDuffie on one side, Emmanuel Forbes, like maybe a rookie or somebody else on the other that you feel confident in, and you have three defenders covering both boundaries and, of course, the center of the field. There's only so many route combos that you're going to be able to run unless you're going to go four vert, and it's the NFL. You don't do that at the NFL level. The reason why I think they want to do that is so they can stack the box or even just everything underneath, if you want to even be more broad, with defensive backs. Guys like Lake and Jalen McCullough. Maybe they liked what they saw from Josh Wallace and they want to incorporate him. Maybe they go and they get one of those inside-outside guys in the draft. Something along those lines. Maybe they go on and get a pass rushing linebacker, so then you change up the numbers. You have five pass rushers, and then you have six dropping into coverage. Well, if you have already guys like McDuffie, Carl, and Forbes, another cornerback, you can then add three more defensive backs to make up that six. Like I said, Lake, McCullough, and then whoever else you want to fill in, if not rotating those guys already. But you do have to wonder, though, how is this going to restrict the team moving forward in addressing some of their other areas of their team? They're not going to be able to add a pass rusher. They checked in on AJ Brown, never made an official offer according to the Athletic Diana Rossini. But the fact that they checked in means that they're looking at potentially who they can line up to take over for Davante Adams or be that bridge that they've had in the past for legends like Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald and now Rob Havenstein and so on and so forth. And then you hear the news today that the Rams re-signed Tyler Higbee. or this week that they re-signed Tyler Higbee. Okay, well, if you're not going to address the tight end position because you already have four, there's a guy like Kenyon Sadiq in the first round. The 13th overall pick then essentially comes down to two positions: cornerback and wide receiver, unless they go interior defensive line for some reason, which is a possibility. If, for example, a guy like Peter Woods from Clemson drops. But by committing so much money to Curl, you kind of handicap yourself or handcuff yourself, should I say, in terms of filling other positions in the draft. Les Snead said that he wanted to use free agency to avoid being desperate in the draft. Okay, it's going to be what happens over this next week and how Snead manages the remainder of his money that is really going to determine if the Rams were successful in doing that or not. Because, as I mentioned, the 13th overall pick is so valuable, but they don't have another first because they traded it away from McDuffie. So, how are they going to address these two positions of need? Do they prioritize cornerback and try and set the cornerback position for life after Stafford? Do they try and go wide receiver? Do they see how the board shapes up? Do they try and trade up in the draft? Try to trade up in the draft last year for Tetsuo McMillan and also Emeka Ibuka, two players that were excellent in the league. There's a lot in play here with this move for Cam Curl. But what isn't in play is that the consistency in the secondary is set. And this is going to allow any type of young player to be able to come in, develop properly, develop at a faster rate than others in the league because there's already these other things that will set the standard and keep it there, if not continuously set new standards. Then comes this. You always wondered what could have been these past 2 years had the Rams gotten the job done. And they had the ball in their hands with the ability to go win it, and they failed twice. Eagles, dialed on offense. There's no doubt about it. Yes, the Rams defense gave up big runs, but for the most part, they kept an offense that was blowing teams out of the water in check. So, of course, what do the Rams do that offseason? They go out and get Davante Adams, that big bodied, tall threat that they can target in the red zone over and over and over again. And it was an immediate success. He led the NFL in touchdown receptions, massive part of Matthew Stafford's MVP campaign. Then you look at this offseason. What were the reasons why the Rams lost in Seattle? Well, there's two reasons. One comes on offense, which I'll talk to in a second, and the second was they didn't have a good enough defense in general. As Jared said, the defensive line and even parts of the secondary are a bit too confident going to that game. And they got caught with their pants down. For lack of a better term, they shit the bucket. There's no other way to say it. Seahawks came in with a perfect game plan, executed it flawlessly, and the Rams had no adjustments that were good enough to shift the narrative of the game and also overcome some of the other mistakes, like Xavier Smith's muff punt. However, that secondary was clearly exposed. So you go out and you get McDuffie, and you keep a guy like Cam Curl, who is a player that allows a guy like McDuffie to play at that high level. The other reason was when the Rams were driving downfield, they did not have a solid, bona fide third receiver threat that Stafford could turn to. He turned to Konate Monfield late. Monfield had the slightest of angles. He was coming back to try and get this ball against, I believe it was Devon Witherspoon, one of the best cornerbacks in the game, and he couldn't secure the ball. I don't blame Monfield for that. That's a 50-50 play in terms of reaction and a 90-10 play in terms of failure to success rate. You do wonder, though, in that situation, had they had a legitimate third threat, a guy who wasn't a seventh round flyer like Monfield has been and who's grown immensely since being drafted, a player who's played a little bit at a higher level, a player who you can rely on a little bit more, would that have been the difference in Seattle? And did the Rams just risk not solving both their problems for what happened in Seattle with this move? If the Rams invest in Curl and they use their 13th pick to address the third man in their three-man cornerback rotation, if they choose to run that next year, well then what do you do at the receiver position? Do you trust Monfield to make that jump in growth? Jordan Whittington to make that third-year jump? Do you think that Davante Adams is going to be able to be healthy all through this run as well? Or do you trust the receiver position with the 13th overall pick and hope that whatever you do with that other quarterback slot, or if you go with no rotation and you keep McDuffie and Forbes in the field as long as you can, that works out and that they don't falter. Another bold move that is just setting yourself up for failure. Les Snead can calm down all these worries very soon within free agency. If he goes out and gets one of those guys, another glue guy that fills out at least one portion of one side of that question, so they can use the draft to figure out the other. But if the Rams are entering that draft with lingering questions at both receiver and outside cornerback, this Cam Crow move might come back to haunt them. However, my final take on this, it's the right move to make. Even though it's a bit expensive, you get what you pay for. And I think that this is an investment that's going to pay dividend over time. For what I see from Curl and what I know from Curl, this is a veteran player. He's very passionate about his work. He's very passionate about his craft. He loves to compete in the big moments. And when called upon, he's gone and done in the past. He is the only reason, not the only reason, he is a major reason why the Rams played in the NFC Championship game. Had he not secured that interception against Caleb Williams in overtime, we are arguably having a very different conversation about this Rams team in 2026. This has been Brock Villar for the Los Angeles Rams Insider Podcast. We'll catch y'all next time. Take care.